Hi, I'm Tom Lemons with the Ayo Iken report. Today we have Dawn McCarty. She is the chairperson of the National Parenting Organization, a chapter here in Florida. And she's here to talk to me today about some of the things and some of the work she's doing here in the state to try to correct and bring awareness to laws that just aren't working equally among parents. And she has a few other things that she's going to do. She's going to tell us a personal story of her own that really drove her to enter this this type of work. And we're going to talk about some other things. So Dawn, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Great.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So Dawn, you are part of this organization, the NPO of Florida. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and then obviously give me a little information on how you decided to join the group?
Sure. National Parenting Organization has been around for quite a while. It is reaching out more on a state level and starting to develop state affiliates so that we can help get more people involved in a national effort to educate parents and also change laws in each state, because each state has different laws.
Right.
So we just started our affiliation here in Florida back in October, so we're brand new. We're just trying to build a team and get things going.
Right.
We got some really great things kind of brewing up, and it sounds like it's going to be a really great effort, and there's things going on already in our state, which is good. We just need to see how those turn out, and then how can we improve upon them.
Okay.
Like
Now, and I know that you're also working with we'll get into it more later, with the An Erasing Family documentary.
Correct.
We did a story on that recently. But you actually, when you joined the NPO and then decided to become a part of this Erasing Family film, you have a personal story of your own that kind of drove you there, right?
Yeah.
Can you mind telling us a little bit about it?
Sure. So I am a child of an abduction and being erased from my father.
Right.
So this happened when I was 4 years old. I was taken out of that environment, thrown into a new environment, and raised with a whole separate a step family,
Right.
more or less, and wasn't really accepted by the family. There was a lot of abuse and stuff that went on with my stepsister, and over the years, I still always wanted to find my dad. I never forgot him, even though I was taken. So I've spent most of my life either dreaming or searching for him.
Wow.
As an adult, I looked and looked, and I became a private investigator so I could use tools to try and find him. And I found him a couple of times, but he had already moved.
Oh.
So it was like I just kept, I'd get really close, and then it just
So it
wasn't there.
real. It was like you were doing some serious detective
Actively
work and
looking, yes.
finding your father.
I mean, if you think about the name McCarty, his name's Patrick. There's thousands and thousands, and I've talked to people in Australia and all over the world that have this name. And
you had no idea where to start.
I had no idea where to start. I knew we were in California at the time. We started here. I was born here in Florida, and we lived in California. And I kept going back to California. Well, I hadn't known that he had moved back to Florida. He also lived in Washington. So we've lived in the same states, and we actually lived in Tarpon Springs at the same time for 5 months, and we didn't even know it. And then I lived in St. Petersburg in 1999, and he lived in Tarpon Springs. So we were so close several different times.
So many could have just reached out and grabbed him, and he just was gone again. Right?
Yeah. So I started Facebook, and I had found a marriage license with his wife's name. And so I just started looking, and I found somebody on Facebook that was married to the same name. And I thought, this has got to be him.
Wow.
And, because I've done so much research that and my mom didn't give me his birthday until 2012, I think. I got his birth date. So then I could start attaching that date to names, and I was able to zero in a little better.
Wow. And then at some point you knew, this is him.
This has got to be him. Everything is lined up. So I sent him a message on Facebook a couple times. And, what do? Like, I'm your lost daughter. So you have to be very careful approaching somebody you haven't talked to in, 44 years.
Or they might block you thinking this is a gag or something.
I don't know.
Right?
As far as I know, he didn't, I didn't know if he wanted anything to do with me or not, because that was severed.
Oh.
There was there was no communication between me and him after I was abducted. So I gently reached out to him on Facebook saying, I am looking for my father, etc. And waited. And it was agonizing to wait. Well, he didn't see the message. I didn't know this. But in Facebook, there's two different areas where you get messages.
Like a spam
either your
folder,
friend's
sort of.
message or you get the,
Right.
So he hadn't seen them, and I sent another message just to follow up. And I knew I could not reach out to his wife because that could be a shock. What if she didn't know it even existed? So this could, I don't want to cause problems.
Right.
So then I started looking through their friends list, and I found another common name between the two of them, Patrick Sean McCarty, which is my brother. And I didn't know it at the time, but I reached out to him, and he's like, yeah, I have a sister named Dawn. And at that point I knew that I actually found my dad. So I asked him if he was interested in speaking to me, and within 5 minutes I was on the phone with my father.
Incredible.
It was amazing. And it was shocking, and I had a question that only he would know the answer to.
Right.
That I would know for 100% certain.
Right.
If he knew the answer to this question, he was my dad. And so I asked him, and right off the bat, he knew exactly what to say.
You must, I can't imagine how you felt. Was it just like
Adrenaline,
an overwhelming?
Yes, it was overwhelming. So much healing takes place, and you don't realize it, but you cannot heal without the other person.
Yeah.
I can't just say, oh, okay, I'm better, I'm okay, I'm going to be over this, because I still have half of my heart that's missing, right?
Right.
And he has half of his that's missing. So neither one of us can heal without each other.
It's an empty space, right? It's an empty space
Yes,
that
there's
never
questions
closed.
that can't be answered. There's, so it does definitely take, and for all of the children out there today, my message to them is you cannot heal until you reach out to your parent. So that's another thing that we need to educate and help parents understand, that you move on with another relationship, but the child's relationship still exists, and they don't forget it. I never forgot.
Right.
So as I was growing up, I always thought back to him, but I was never allowed to talk to him or talk about him. And I had to call her new husband. He was my dad from that point on.
Right.
So the other one just stopped existing to her.
Yeah.
And that's convenient. It's nice that, she got to create this family and move on, but it didn't help me move on.
No.
That's when I was approached by Erasing Family to become an ambassador.
Erasing Family, was a film that we recently did a story on, about stories just like Dawn's, who were families, basically the child is taken away by one of the parents, and they don't have the opportunity to be raised by both, or even are told stories about the other parent that basically the child doesn't want anything to do with that with the parent. So this was again another film that you should check. What's the website for that?
It's erasing.org, and there's a trailer right there on that front page that they can watch and get a really good idea of what the film's about.
So it's erasingfamily.org, and you definitely should take a look at that. But back to Dawn, you said you found this organization and you decided to do what?
Well, I started looking at the trailers, and I started thinking, wow, I really relate to one of the protagonists in the film. Right off the bat, I knew exactly, in my mind, I knew exactly what she had gone through herself.
Right.
So I was starting to get really interested in it, and I started to do whatever I could to participate. And I drove to, I actually went to a parents' march in Washington, D.C., which I had no idea what I was in for.
Wow.
But I was able to meet somebody from Erasing Family there, and we were able to learn a lot, and then I got a little bit more information and involved. I decided to get more involved. So then later on that year, I went to 2 back-to-back screenings in Pennsylvania, where Ginger was actually present. And I got to, and I had spoken with Ginger several times through emails and on the phone, but I got to meet her in person and work through that whole screening back to back, and that's the first time I actually saw the full film. And I'll tell you, it was definitely an eye-opener, and and I could relate 100% with all of it. It was really done well. It gives the message is very clear, and she does a really good job of making it's about the children,
Right.
And changing statutes. And the whole focus of the film is to expose the family bond obstructions, and that's done through the court systems.
And you were actually saying earlier that the big problem is each state with their unique laws, and then kind of backing up a little, how she went to Argentina and actually was able to
Her first film.
Yeah, her first film was able to get the laws changed completely to where fathers had rights in Argentina, right?
In Argentina, it was all for the moms. The moms were always given custody of the children, and the fathers really didn't have any rights. So her film helped change their laws, and then she came back to the United States and did one here, and in a couple other countries too. So the Racing Family film kind of stretched the borders a little bit more, and has definitely expanded upon some of the issues here in the States.
Right.
And so it's a global thing. It's really a global thing.
Oh, I would imagine. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure it's black and white different in various countries too, right? I mean, I'm sure.
Well, and if you look at the United States, a bunch of just little smaller countries, so to speak. I mean, we're states, but basically, each state has their own statutes.
Now, you were saying something about there's a grading scale that was created that basically says, one state gets an A, one gets a B, a C, whatever, based on their statutes, right?
Yes.
So tell us, here in Florida, what grade did we get on our statute?
So Florida's grade was, I think we've moved up to a C plus from a C or C minus. So we've moved up slightly. And that's because of what has been done in the past to help try and promote a shared parenting bill, which, in the 2016, we did have a bill on the floor that was vetoed by our former governor, Rick Scott.
Right.
So because there is more awareness and more efforts put into this, we did move up just a little bit in our grade. However, it's still not, it's not a good enough grade. Not doing enough.
And so there are some states across the country who are doing very well. Was it Arizona or which
Arizona got an A,
wow.
And Kentucky is the only state in our country that's got an A+.
That's fantastic. Give me an example of some of the specific differences, if you can think of some, that make the grade, cause the grades to fluctuate.
So the grading system isn't that our court systems did this or didn't do that. Our grading system is based only on the statutes that our state holds.
Okay.
So based on our statutes, that's our grade. Kentucky actually has the verbiage in their current statutes that is the presumption of equal parenting. So what we're talking about is not 50-50, you get the child 50% of the time and I get it the other 50, or get him or her. It's about equal parenting. So it's 50-50 parenting. So you are always an equal parent all along.
So the precedence needs to be set that in each state, that it is not an ownership type thing. This isn't a material item.
You are still an equal parent to the child.
Right.
Because of who you are to the child.
So the bar starts there, and then if there are issues that come along, then you work from that point.
So then you go from that, you're working out the timeline, the scheduling. So you can't say you get 50% of the time, I get 50, because every family has different dynamics. They have different schedules, different, maybe both parents work, maybe only one works. So it has to work for the family as far as how often the child is where.
Right.
The point is that children, and it doesn't matter how long it takes them to drive to mom's house or how long it takes dad to come and pick them up at school. It doesn't matter in the long run, because I've heard people say, well, the kid shouldn't have to suffer the burden of traveling for an hour. And I'll disagree with them 100%. Because if you look at the time that they lose, let's add up those hours.
Right.
So if I had to spend an hour in a car to go see my dad, I lost 44 years. That's 385 some odd thousand hours that I lost compared to 1 hour drive. So they have to look at both sides. They can't just look at the one side of this and say, oh, we have to do better for the kids, because you're taking something from them eventually they are really going to need, and that accumulates a lot worse.
Right. Child wants to see their parent. Especially younger children, they don't they don't want to know all this crazy adult stuff, or they don't want to be involved in all that crazy adult stuff, right? They just want to love both parents, right?
Right. And what happens with the child is an impressionable person. You know, they rely on the trust that they have in their parents. So when a parent, someone that they absolutely trust, is saying, this person is scary, the child is going to believe it because you told them that.
Right.
And so the child doesn't automatically think that person's scary because they have natural love for that parent.
Sure.
When you start telling them they're scary, now they have doubt. And the child should never be doubting their parental relationships. So an example is for me when I was a child, and I recall this a lot because of just remove the parents out of it. So I'm a child and I wanted to go see my step-grandfather. I didn't know he was my step-grandfather.
Sure.
I just knew he was my grandfather on my mom's side. And I wanted to visit him, and my cousins were saying horrible things about him. And I was instantly afraid of him from that point on.
Wow.
None of that was true. They just wanted me to stay and visit with them. So they made up this story so I wouldn't go. The point is, a child is an impressionable. That children are impressionable, and they believe those that they are involved, in the environment.
Would you consider something like that? And I've asked other guests the same story, same question. Do you think that is a form of abuse for one parent to lie about the other parent?
It's manipulation, and it's called an emotional cutoff. You're creating an emotional cutoff of that child's relationship to their parent, and children need those connections. It helps with their self-esteem. It helps establish them in the direction that they're going to take in their life. It gives them motivation. It gives them values. There's all kinds of things that are attached to having access to their parent in that bond. And when you sever the bond, you leave so much doubt and pain and trauma behind.
Well, I want to move on to a few other things before we run out of time. You also, so from this film, which you now are actively working in, I mean, you are an associate producer of the film. You travel around the state and outside the state to put on these screenings, these premieres for Erasing Family, and so you're active in that. But you're also a guardian ad litem, right?
Yes, I am.
So I mean, you are doing. In every area, you're trying to help children and families as often as you can.
And I had some motivation becoming a guardian ad litem because I needed to understand what a child that didn't have, at first I didn't believe that the court cases affected me because I didn't know about that affidavit up until June of this year.
Right.
So I had no idea. But I wanted to know because I thought, my case wasn't involved in the family courts.
Right.
So I have no idea. So I decided to become a guardian ad litem so that I could learn what really happens in these situations. Now I'm a dependency guardian ad litem.
Sure.
Not a private guardian ad litem. But I'm sure there's a lot of similarities there.
Does that mean that you are basically appointed by the court?
I'm appointed by the
That's how that works. Okay.
Yeah, so I have just done this year, only a couple of cases, but it's really been an eye-opener. And I can see now, knowing what I know and what I've learned, I can see what's going on in the dynamics of the family unit and all kinds of stuff. And a lot of things that parents go through when they're self-medicating or they're acting out, or even the children are acting out, is this emotional imbalance that we have based off the trauma.
Wow.
So we're reacting and we're not healing.
Right.
So we need to have that chronic trauma therapy.
Right.
We need to bring this more, full circle.
Right.
And help people, because what we're seeing is a bad reaction from the trauma that they suffered, and we're trying to fix it with, certain things that will, that can help.
Sure.
But it's not a cookie cutter experiment. I mean, we have to find real resources.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you're learning a lot as you go along with these cases. Have you seen any type of a trend? I mean, I've had people tell me that they've, they see parents using that, that non-politically correct term, but parental alienation, things like that. Do you sense that, or do you think that a lot of these cases are genuine and that these children really do need to be in a different situation?
So it is true that there are certain phrases that create more conflict.
Right.
And it makes it harder to fight your case because parental alienation doesn't have the correct diagnosis that you would need in court. So the first thing that happens is they don't listen anymore.
Right.
The real phrase that we should be using is an emotional cutoff.
Okay.
Because that can be diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can be worked with. So you need to have the correct, I don't want to say correct, effective therapy with a PSYD. So you need a clinical psychiatrist that can actually diagnose, the chronic PTSD symptoms, helping with those emotions, that kind of thing. So there's ways to rephrase the words we use.
Right.
And using parental alienation brings conflict.
It does.
And I'm sure you're aware with,
Sure.
different groups that they think people hide behind
Right.
the meaning.
Right.
And so eliminate that from your
Sure.
vocabulary.
And maybe, but also find ways that we can correct it without using that term. But like you said,
The emotional cutoff.
Emotional cutoff. And maybe courts, would you suggest that courts, and again, this is back to this trying to change statutes and raise our grade here in Florida, but do you believe that these are things that should be part of any court case involving a
Absolutely.
child, that
Yeah.
the child should be examined by a psychiatrist or something for emotional cutoff, or it should be examined by some type of.
Well, yeah, and if it was up to me, I think anybody going through a divorce would have to go through this type of counseling so that you can learn what to not do, what to look for, how to recognize what's going on. And the courts need to learn this as well because they get these cases, but they only see it when they're in the courtroom.
Wow.
So they absolutely need to be able to recognize it. And as we're using the correct language and they're seeing things going on, it's going to help have a more holistic outcome.
Sure. I mean, and imagine the courts are just overflowing with cases too. I mean, it's got to be, a lot of people want to blame the judge, and I mean, they are to blame on it. That's a whole other story in some cases, but I mean, judges aren't, always the fault. It's they're only going by the statute. Right. They go by their statutes. They go
and
by
in the
case
film,
law.
you've seen the film.
Right.
So in the film, you recall the judge that said, "No, we don't follow up.
Right.
We can only
There's
deal
so
with
many
what we have
cases.
right here."
Right.
So they make a ruling, but they don't know what happened afterwards.
Right.
And they just can't. So the rulings need to be more zeroed in on what actually helps the family heal.
Right. And thankfully we have people like you out there. I mean, working for the National Parenting Organization, the Erasing Families work that they're doing, and then also performing your duties as a guardian ad litem. I mean, you
And
have
a full-time job.
a full-time job. I
And
mean,
a
you
full-time
are
student.
Yeah. So I mean, you've pretty much literally dedicated your entire life to somehow helping
Definitely
families and
refocusing.
children. Right. Well, that's such an honorable thing that you're doing. Real quick, just want to let's remind our viewers about the websites that they can find out more about. Let's say the National Parenting Organization. Do they have for Florida? Does it have its own designated website, or do we go to the main website? How does that work?
You go to nationalparentsorganization.org.
Okay.
Or if you want to look at the report card for your state, and this is any state, you go to sharedparenting.org, and it'll take you to the report card site, and then you click on your state.
Okay.
And then you can find out what statutes are doing good and what statutes need improvement.
Great.
And there's a lot of other information out there as well. And then the erasingfamily.org website for screenings and more about the film. There's a trailer on that landing page. We're having screenings coming up in the beginning of the year.
I was going to ask you, you've done several here in the state of Florida. You have a couple more coming up. Do you want to tell us some real quick details about that?
Yeah, we have done a couple here, and it's the Erasing Family Impact Campaign. So what we're doing is we're taking this film, and it's sponsored by National Parenting Organization for Florida. So we're combining the two, and we're taking it to every major city or any city that we can in the state of Florida.
Great.
So that we can educate the people, the residents in Florida, because as that information is spread, we also want to educate the young adults because they're the ones going through this or had recently gone through this, and that's where we start making change so the kids of today don't have to go through what we've gone through.
Do you think This would be something good for school districts to
Absolutely,
adopt?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, school districts, universities, churches, anybody that is involved in community and in the children's welfare. So mental health professionals, attorneys, courts, guardian ad litems. So we're having a screening for the dependency court guardian ad litems here in Pasco County.
So Pasco, this would include the Pasco and Pinellas, or
District
the Sixth
Sixth
Circuit.
District.
Okay.
Yeah, circuit.
And
Thank you.
and then you're even going to try to do one for the Fifth Circuit at some point. Is that
Yeah,
in
or
the works?
if depending on how much room, and I just have to figure out the logistics.
Sure,
We might be able to combine it into the one or have separate ones. We'll do as many
Yeah.
of these screenings that we can put on.
So obviously, this is not something that can be done for free, right?
No,
You
right.
need this organization needs help to keep bringing these screenings around to different areas. How can they help your organization?
So I'm a volunteer. So a lot of this I do on my own time. So I have my own full-time job, and I do this on my spare time. And to view the film, it doesn't matter if it's one person or 1,000 people. It's $250 to be able to. It's purchasing the license basically,
Right.
because
Right.
of the contracting that's going on for Netflix and HBO. They want this to be on those big platforms. We can only view this because of the contract
The
agreements.
licensing, yeah.
We can only view it in a screening by invitation. So that's how come we have to do it this way until those contracts are met.
And $250 really is nothing for something this
Well, you can
this
sell
important.
tickets. Someone can
Right.
donate the money. So if we charge $5 at the door, I mean, there's all kinds of ways that we can work through it.
Absolutely.
And we're asking for donations for the guardian ad litem. Because I'm a guardian ad litem,
Right.
I can't charge my fellow guardian ad litems to see it. So
And I can tell you the discussions, because again, we did attend one of these doings. The discussions afterwards are just really enlightening. People share their opinions, they ask questions, and Dawn is there, and there's other volunteers sometimes. So this is something very important for any community, especially here in Florida, to help change the way our court systems work, how families treat each other, how parents treat each other, and ultimately how the child's life develops. And
making
I think
lives happy, making divorce healthier for children.
right,
Because
right,
we can't stop divorce,
that's right,
but we can make it better for children.
absolutely. Well, Dawn, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. I
really
appreciate it.
appreciate you coming in.
This is great. Thank you.
Thank you.